This is another message from the underground. The voice of Free Earth, brought to you by Seils, straight from the source. You are here now with a special purpose to fulfill. And you are not alone. This is it, family. It's up to us. One planet, one spiritual source, in a multitude of forms. Stay human. Protect the planet. Raise the consciousness.
Hi guys, Paul Seils. Thanks for joining us for the final series, the final installment for Actualising Independence. Today we're going to be talking about God, false idols and completion. It is our projections that we are exposed to, the possibilities of our unmanifest truth, a constant, though often inconvenient invitation presented from the infinite nobility of our imagination. This ever-present and patient force only asks you to step to embody the magnificence of your creating. It is becoming the individual who courageously chooses to embrace this difference that realizes the power of completion. Life is the experience fulfilled in the realization that we have the courage to create untold difference. Join us as we explore a life released. Jason Reynolds, thanks for joining us.
Pleasure, Paul. Thank you very much for having me. Excited to be here. And the 8 weeks has gone real quick.
It has gone very quick. You're in a magnificent part of the world. I love your screensaver there. It's very impressive.
Yeah, no, this one's just a natural one, but it's very blessed to be where I am. Just another great part of Australia.
Yeah. Magnificent. So talking about false, obviously this is the completion of the series. We've covered a lot of ground in these last 8 weeks. It's gone super fast. So talking about God, false idols and completion. I mean, that even itself, even the concept of the subject of interpretation of what God or what anyone has an interpretation of God, if any, and then also talking about false idols. So what do we mean by that?
It's a simple approach back to the concept that everything that exists around us is here to support us. And for many of us, and we've touched on this as we've moved through this series, is the most challenging thing that people have to confront in their own life is their own significance, not just what they are, but being able to embody that and live from that without needing to look to any self-created manifested idea of some higher entity, some higher being, something that is more capable than us. I mean, there's many stories. There's the ancients. It's gone on for generations or for eons that there is some sort of higher power that has created us. There is some sort of higher power that has an impact or an influence over us. But to me, when we get down to the very basics of life, when we allow ourselves to find our own attention, to find our own peace, we start to recognize the connection that we have to all that there is. And ultimately, we can come to a place where we recognize, and some may consider this a level of arrogance, but it's a humility. And let me just clarify that. The humility to me is not about being meek. It's not about being softly spoken. It's not about listening to others. It's about understanding yourself so that there is nothing else to prove, that we are the container of our own destiny. And within that, there is nothing there that interrupts us. And for many of us, we go through these moments of life where we find, a philosophy or an ideal or even a guru of some sort that directs us in a way that we don't believe we can do and in our own self. So the gods, you look at the ancient gods of Greece, and even Roman gods, is that they are documented to once exist, but now they don't. And the real truth in that is that people didn't believe in them anymore, and therefore they stopped existing. And we continue to keep, I suppose, projecting things on our life that we don't understand onto some unknown force, and that unknown force is not an entity of any sort. It's not an alien race. It is what is within us. And you know, just the concept of that, when someone's come to believe in a God, when someone's come to believe in another race or a higher state of being, is to suggest that they don't understand how to access that within themselves. And the irony is how simple that is. How present, when we do become to our own self, it's the foundation that we are able to stand upon that allows us to find that peace without needing to change it, but to come to understand it in a way that we align with it, and to recognize a very part of our existence is about creation. You know, what we are here, we are the creator in every particular part, but where we do not take responsibility, we project responsibility. And for many of us, we've created this responsibility into something that is so magnificent, so significant, but we fail to see that that's just ourselves. Every particular, thing that we've put out there in life is just a manifestation of ourselves. Yes, we can cause to see them. We can have experiences that are let's say, a phenomena. We can even believe we've been taken away in some particular part, or been in contact with some altered being. And that is a part, as we start to see that, as we start to project that right in front of us, that we bring. Let's just look at this. Everything that exists in our life first was seeded in our imagination. And how ironic it is that when we're brought up through life, we're told to, don't be a daydreamer, come back to reality. And, all of these types of notions, to be grounded is to be standing on that foundation which supports us most significantly. And for each of us, it's just understanding what that is for me, not what it is for another. We can learn from others in the way in which they approach it, but it's got to come back to a point in our own life, and to truly encapsulate our own attention is that we are everything that there is. And when we can come to understand, like we do when we meet someone and we become so enamored to them and so aspiring to what it is that someone may bring to our own life, we are ultimately seeing the example that we can aspire to in our own life. But, through understanding, we recognize that example that I'm being provided, we can then be audacious enough to ask the question, how would I do it? Without any preconceived concept, because this concept of in our own life where we need to prepare for what's happening in this idea to control an outcome, it is a very limited state of being, where if we understood ourselves and we trusted in each and every moment that we can make a decision, and that is to let go of what was in order to move forward into what we're creating, without knowing what that looks like, having a feeling, maybe having a sense of it, but to allow it to unfold. And once it actually does exist in front of us, that we can make a decision then. For many of us, we find stress, which is the pulling, one thing being pulled in two different directions. When we are living outside of our reality rather than within our reality, we are under stress. We are in a state of reaction. And to create is to bring forward something that has never existed. Not to repeat, not to innovate, but to create from a place within our own self that no one else understands, that we need to find that courage and understanding on how to actually bring that into a state of presence so that other people can observe it. And
so can I ask you, Jason, just like, what's an example of that? So someone's got, someone's out to create and fulfill on something, and in relation to the process of fulfilling on that, just so I can get an example.
Well, an example is what often happens is when someone comes to that particular place and they feel fulfilled and they feel engaged and they feel alive, too often they're putting it out to the environment that exists around them, rather than recognizing when they bring something through that is phenomenal within them. What most of us do is we then put it out to an audience for other people to see what they think of it, but yet we have not yet understood it. That is for our own creation, and that's where patience comes, that when we have an idea, when we have an inspiration, it is for our own audience to understand that in order to manifest it. Because as soon as we start to engage and bring other people into that particular space before we understand it ourselves, we start to create and be influenced by what exists around us rather than what's within us. So if I have an idea as an individual who may not have achieved much through a social standing or a professional standing, But I have this concept within me that I want to change the very nature of freedom and how it exists in this world. But the things that I'm going to confront in my own self is, well, what have I done to this particular point? Who am I to do that? And then as soon as we start to engage others, there's a level of judgment that comes, well, who are you to do that? Like, how are you going to do this? And the whole point and the liberation of life is to be able to step into that place, well, I don't know, but continue to keep moving forward. For many of us, we use I don't know as a reason to stop, because we don't want to be ashamed. We don't want to make a mistake. We don't want to do it wrong. And ultimately, it's that life, in its most pure sense, is about navigation through the unknown. When we are moving into the light, or what is seen, or what has already been manifested, we are simply repeating something that we've already engaged with, rather than being able to step into, let's say, the collective darkness. And look, the darkness only becomes evil, and it only becomes overbearing, and it only becomes toxic when we continue to ignore it and it remains stagnant. It's when we embrace it and we finally go, oh, fuck it, I'm just going to do this. And as we start to do that, all of those things that have been around us, the weight that we feel upon us, the energy we feel upon us, is all this stagnant, stuck energy that has no leader. And it's like a group of people sitting around complaining about life and wondering, well, when are we going to get there? How are we going to get there? But as soon as the leader turns up and says, all right, with a clear plan, this is what we're doing, this is where we're heading. And that's the patience within ourselves to be able to, aspire and bring forward that leader to go, you know what, I'm not quite sure, but I'm going to take the courage and I'm going to move forward, because every great leader would know. I would suggest every single one, 100% of the time, if you looked at the people through history that have made a difference, they didn't know how they were going to get there. Yeah. But they engaged a level of confidence in themselves, which other people bought into, because they believed that this person was going to find a way. And so, this could be just about, where you're sending your kids to school, to what car I'm going to buy, compared to, bringing about significant change on a magnanimous level, internationally and beyond. This is about the recognition that when my life is complete in this particular space, that I as an individual have left a legacy and an imprint on this particular place, and leaving it better, because I have, exhausted all that was within me. And I've allowed myself to express that out into a greater fabric that becomes stronger for my existence.
Yeah. I just want to go back to the conversation we're having about, and you touched on about the concept of God and not needing any, or correct me if I heard it wrong, about not needing the externalization. I've done other interviews with people as well, Jason, including Neil Donald Walsh, who wrote the book Conversations with God and that sort of thing as well. But what you're saying there in relation to, there's a lot of people spend their time sort of in prayer or attending church and that sort of thing, that would sort of find some of those concepts perhaps a little bit blasphemous.
Yeah, I'm sure. And that's a great thing. I mean, this is a whole, we talk about free speech, but the whole notion of free speech is to get away. The problem with free speech is that people believe there's a right way. My religion, my teaching, my philosophy, my experience and success of life. There is no right way, there is your way. And the whole point of free speech, and where it's become a real problem recently, is because certain people believe in this is the right way. And this is what creates wars and creates division in all forms, that there is supposedly a right way that is generalized for every individual, because we are cloned in some way to be a community and be together, rather than when we become individualized, we fit into our own space in what we're here to create, and it allows a space for others to do the same. And if we're engaged in what we're doing, it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. But, these are, people find God, for example, and look, at 12, 13 years of age, I was speaking in tongues, and it was a phenomenal experience. I didn't really completely understand it at the time. And, I saw people in that particular space that were so engaged in life, and they had this message now to share about what they'd found. But their ability to be able to maintain that enlivenment in their own life as they find something new and step into something they don't understand is about maintaining that. So as we come into a particular belief or a philosophy or an ideal, it's not now staying stuck in that particular place. Yes, we grow and evolve through these experiences, but it's that ability to recognize this is what it feels like for me to be alive. What can I do to continue to do that? And that may mean letting go of my religion. That may mean letting go of the way that I previously saw things. But like you say with Neil Donald Walsh, I would say again, the significance and how big we would like to see ourselves to be, and the capacity to be able to accept that is directly related to the foundation and the strength upon which we stand. If our foundation is not solid, and that is all based upon our understanding of ourselves, not who we are, but what we are, and being self-determined in that particular point, to be, audacious enough to go, well, this is what I see it as, and I don't need to be influenced by you in another way, but I'm going to listen because I have that foundation. But if that foundation is not strong and it's reliant upon something outside of us, we become easily moved, we become easily taken by the wind or by the next feeling that drives us. And, there is a magnificence that exists, as you could say, in Neil Donald Walsh, to accept that he's having a conversation with himself, and that the magnificence that exists within him. I mean,
that's probably that title wouldn't have sold as well, though, Jason. Conversation with myself.
Of course it wouldn't, because people, there is, it is being given such when you come into the space of your own realization of how significant you are, some of us step into that spotlight and race through it because the light is too bright. And to be able to articulate that to others, to say that this is what I believe in myself, society very much has a lot of intrinsic beliefs about, being big-headed, being arrogant, being selfish, and all of these misconceptions that are all about keeping people in an equalized and safe space. And look at it. I mean, in Australia, we have something called the tall poppy syndrome, but in parts of the world where people go to make a change or go to make a difference that is rocking the apple cart, that people react to it. I don't like that person. I don't like what they stand for. Do you know that they did this? And they start to find things that pull that person's character apart to justify why they don't have to follow that example to start to expand and create something great within their own life. And, that is a very nature around self. But when someone who is strong enough to say definitively, this is what I believe and this is what I'm heading towards, and whether that may be God, whether that may be whatever it may be in whatever relationship, that particular individual, they have the capacity to choose that relationship, and then they have the capacity to build upon that relationship, but most importantly to understand it. Because if we were to see that the true size and significance of what we were, and we were able to maintain our ability to look directly into the sun, directly into our soul for a longer period of time, that is all determined by our foundation, our strength to stand the storm, that when challenges come in our life, that we do not get blown over by it. And you got to understand what just happened. This is crazy. The ability to stand through the storm, through the fire, is what allows us to discover what's on the other side of it. But when we can have people support us and say, geez, that's a terrible thing, and we give ourselves a leave pass to move away from looking directly into our own truth, we then start to discover, people around us that are also fearful of the significance of what they are as well.
Which is interesting too. And you talked about like the standing in our brilliance with humility. I mean, why is it that for some of us, and the externalization of the projections, that there's more accentuation on like what's wrong or what's not working or what's deficient, rather than us standing in our power of our brilliance? Why is that for some of us?
Oh, well, I'd ask you, Paul, I can answer this, but what would you say that would be?
I just think I don't know. I have no idea. I would guess to say it would be more in the conversation for like other people's opinions rather than your own, and other externalizations, opinions, etc.
Yeah, and look, what I'm suggesting here is, it's an opportunity that people have. It's not, there's no gun to anyone's head they have to do this, but it's an opportunity to recognize our full capacity. But it comes back to one thing: trust. It's not possible, and it's kind of arrogant in its expectation that we trust someone else, because to trust someone else is to take away from our own capacity to create. We can be engaged, and we cannot hold people to account because of what you told me and what you said you were going to do. That is an opportunity for them to express themselves, and there's a great opportunity that they won't do that in a way that supports you, because the very nature is they'll end up doing something at some point that you believe is a matter of mistrust. but it's ultimately where you have misplaced your trust in them to fulfill something in your life. And we've got to, I suppose, be in a state of reality, not imprisoning others to keep them accountable to our life. We've got to take ownership of that, because it doesn't matter how much we complain about other people and what they said they were going to do, nothing will change. The only thing that will change is when I move forward from that and I decide, you know what, I'm going to pick this up and I'm going to do something with it, irrespective of what I was told, what I was promised along the way. So trust is a very significant part. I mean, and trust is demonstrated by the actions we take. We get in a car and we start driving and we start pushing the pedal, and we trust, because we trust the brakes, we trust it to work. But at times, that's compromised, and we have to get it repaired. But the very point of trust is, some of us have something called, or not all of us have this, but some of us practice a deeper capacity of intuition, which is the ability to be able to interpret energy as information that we can then determine what's relevant to us and act upon it. And that demonstrates the trust that we have through the source of information. For many of us, what we've learned is to trust in others, the teacher, the parent, and everyone else that's there. And parents have a very significant role in this as a custodian of children for a short period of time, to create a space where they can evolve, to provide ever expanding boundaries in the preparation that we have, so that they can, after 13 or 14 years of age, start to actually exercise that in the safety of the environment that's been created, so they can eventually go and do that without the training wheels on, when they do leave the nest or the home. So the big part here with trust is not an occasional, I'm getting a feeling, or I'm sort of tuning in and getting this information. It's an in the moment absolute awareness, where you're not tuning in, where you're not accessing this higher state of being, where you just are, you're tuned in. You become aligned, you become what I would call integrated at a physical and energetic level. There is no mind. The mind is the separation of the physical and energetic, and the space in between that, where we've created excuses to not stand in our power. And and this is where a lot of philosophies, I would say, are confused and provide false information, because they start to get people to focus on the mind. I mean, the mind itself, look at the word, it's right there in front of us. To mind is to hold on to. And the mind is just that. It's holding on to the information that we've had previously, rather than tapping into, when we're in a state of integration, we access an awareness. And that awareness is solely for our own self. And it's for our ability to trust in that, is to have communication with ourselves that we develop over a period of time. And it's something that I'm dedicated to teaching people, is not just how to hear a voice, but to act upon it as it arises in the moment. Because for many of us, we have great ideas. We were all to get the ideas that we'd had, and we thought, if I'd taken that through to completion, where would I be right now? I mean, we don't lack for opportunity. We don't lack for life. We don't lack for, a greater significance of what we could create. What we fail in is completion, which starts with the trust, to be able to continually be guided at each particular step before we get tripped over by the unexpected things that arise as we start to move towards our own brilliance.
Yeah.
So,
but some of us do fail in completion. Some of us sort of choose not to complete as well. There is a difference there, right? Yeah,
but I mean, what's the justification for that in our own self? And this is where we've got to have the patience within our own self that, I didn't complete that because, I didn't know at that particular point. If we can be patient with ourselves and be realistic to go, I didn't complete that. And the real terms, rather than blaming the environment or the people within it, is to say, well, actually, the real truth is, in my own vulnerability, I didn't know. I pretended to know. I wanted to assume that I knew. I wanted other people to think that I knew. But ultimately, I don't know. And these are some of the responsibilities that come as an adult, that we assume that we have to know things, or we get to a certain age and people expect us to know things, and rather than go, I don't know, which allows us to take on more information, be open-hearted to receive that, is instead we close off and go, no, I know what to do here. And we don't complete things in our own life because we get to a point where we don't understand what to do next, and then we don't exercise the humility enough to ask questions until, it might be not just one person, it might not be one course, it might not be one adventure, it's multiple, because I'm not stopping until I'm complete. And this is where failure comes, is because failure is just choosing to complete before you are complete. It is choosing to stop at a pace that is painful. There is, and we can have great stories around that. And look, this is all very simple, but it's not easy. But the whole point of, we've got to make a decision at some point in our life. Do I want freedom? Do I want to lead? Do I want to create a difference? And if the answer to that is no, well, don't keep putting yourself through a state where you're going to continue to keep working through things in your life. Because just on that, I don't believe there is anything to work on in our life. There are simply things to understand, and every pain and trauma that anyone has is in that inability to understand it as it truly is. And for many of us, we hold on to these resentments, we hold on to these misplaced relationships and tragedy, because we don't understand either what was said, how we respond to it, or how we move past it, because that's life. We're moving through things, and sometimes that's going down the roller coaster, and other times it's a blissful experience. But if we can take the time to be patient and not caught up in our day-to-day life, I've got to make money, I've got to do this, we'll never get off that wheel if we never choose to get off that wheel.
Yeah.
But we've got to in having trust is the ability to hear the resonance of our integrated being. So first we have to be able to get to that state where we can integrate in a very short and very practiced and habitual way, until it just becomes autonomic within us. So there's no effort required. It is a natural part of our own process. And this is where we've come from. We've just simply created a whole range of interruptions along the way. But here's the issue. A lot of what I would say in a lot of teachings is people focus upon working on the problems. There's no problems to work on. And if you continue to keep working on the problems and you get progress, guess what you find after you've gone through the problem? You find another problem, because that's your habit. I need a problem. I've got this thing that's bad in my life and it's terrible, and I liberate myself from it. Well, what do I do now? This becomes this great expanse, this great unknown in front of us, where we have the opportunity to create. But instead, what most of us do is go back to what we've learnt, and we find another problem, because it does feel good. It's like a temporary hit, like a drug. It was, I got past this, geez, it was good. But, I've got to get to a point when I create that space. And this is the apathy of many of us that's ingrained, is that when we do have success, we put our feet up. When we do have, a great experience in a relationship where we've just done something that's amazing, it's really uplifted that individual, we kind of relax and think, oh, well, everything's good now. Rather than at that particular peak, at that fertile ground, when everyone is contributing and engaged at that moment, to then be bold enough to leave that bliss behind, to create more beyond it and create the habit of creation, rather than the habit of problem solving, reaction, and doing these ideas that a lot of spiritual teachings that I believe will start to dissolve in the coming decades, is that we need to work on ourselves. This whole nature of work, I don't know anyone who thinks of work as like, let's go and do. Work has got this attachment, this energy to it, that I have to work on myself. You've got to do the work. There's a whole other range of ways of going on an adventure and understanding yourself and looking at yourself in awe and considering, what I am. I mean, how often do we do this? How often does anyone do that? Rather than going, oh, I'd love to, but I've got all of this stuff in my life. Yes, we all do. We've all got it in different forms and different shapes. But for some of us, we eventually will get to a point where we go, you know what I'm doing at the moment doesn't work for me to get me into a place that I want to be. And you know what? I'm going to swallow a little bit of pride, because I assumed that I did know. So as an individual, that's not an easy thing. And that's why a lot of what we do is we teach it in a group, because you have an interaction, like a sandbox to play in, to actually understand how you can start to express yourself in a very significant way, how you can allow yourself to be exposed, because it is not possible in life to move forward into a state of growth without exposing a part of you that has not been seen previously. And with exposure, in a dynamic of opposites, with exposure becomes judgment. So if we are not resilient within our own self to actually deal with that, but then more importantly, understand that as I grow and as I move forward and I get into a place of creation, not in a place of fixing, because this is a difference. When we're fixing problems, we have people supporting us, because we're coming back to the herd. But when we decide to come out the other side of the herd and we're going to now make change, it's like, oh, wait a second, I'm quite comfortable here. Well, why are you saying that? Why do you need to do that? And there's this unconscious holding people back and to stay close to me, rather than this elevation of the individual to go, wow, you've got the courage to do that. Because the focus of our society is that we need to look after the weakest link. What about if we elevated and created more space by elevating, even though we didn't have that we aspired to those that were the greatest examples that are demonstrated in many areas of life, from arts, to parenting, to business, whatever it may be, that we look to aspire to that rather than look at and try to pull apart their character because of the way they spend their money or what they do in their relationship and what they said. And these are the types of things where we're looking at justifications why we don't have to look into our own son, into the soul within us, in order to understand and unravel that, like a never-ending parcel. By each layer, there's an excitement there till you get to, wow, I've got this. And it's from that particular point that you then start that whole process again. But it's not work, it's life. And we've created this ideal by these outside practices that are outside of life. So we separate ourselves, like, the bastardization, I'd say, of meditation is it's a separation from life. And then I go about living my life in a very different way. And then I come back and meditate. Not saying that's always the case, but a lot of it is practice like that, like a medication. If I just do this once a week or whatever, I'm feeling good, or each morning. It's about the integration of what comes in that experience with a trust that is only can be achieved when we speak clearly and openly to ourselves, that we can then determine, all right, well, what I'm getting the awareness of now is to move out of this role. But my mind says to me, no, you can't afford that. You have to pay the bills. Just wait a second. And within you, your heart's breaking, your soul's cracking, and it's sitting there wanting to express itself. But we continue to keep suppressing it, and we listen to the practices of our mistakes from the past that we're holding on to, rather than liberating them by moving into a new space where they don't exist. So to me, there's one simple practice that requires us to go forward, and first in any moment of life, is the ability to release and let go. That is the first step that everyone must go through and become comfortable with, because until we do that, you're only taking through the toxicity or the stories or whatever it is from the past, whether they're beautiful as well, into the next part. And it's influencing that, and you're seeing it as you were rather than as you now are. These great opportunities that are presenting. I remember going out and being with two people about 10, 15 years ago. And we walked out and it was a beautiful day. And one person said, "What an amazing day. How great is this?" And when I agreed, I said, "It's just stunning, isn't it?" And the person that we're with said, "Oh, I can't stand the sun. I don't like this." And they were, dead set serious that they liked the dreariness of other types of weather. And it was, it wasn't a good thing for them to go out in the sun. They didn't enjoy it. So that we've all got to look at, I suppose, in that difference, that person had the courage to say what was not common, but it's what was true to them. And if we can start going down that path, and we can start releasing and letting go of the stuff that we're holding on to. I mean, even in a relationship that we have at an intimate level, the real key to being present in that relationship and honoring the growth and the change in the individual that you're sharing your life with is to not see them as they were yesterday, to not remind them of the problems or the brilliance and the greatness that they have achieved. But it's in this particular moment to be humble enough to be with them right at this moment. And then you see a different opportunity, that the sun or not the sun, as a something that engages you to move forward further in life and go outside, or wanting to go back inside. But it's for each of us to be able to, first release and become patient in just doing that. We don't need any deep energetic practices until we can actually create a space where we can actually receive them. Because if we still keep holding on to stuff and that becomes stagnant and toxic, when we do get to a place where the opportunity exists, suddenly as we move forward, all of this shit comes up in our life to interrupt us because we haven't yet released what it was that we've been holding on to. And each day in that relationship, if you let go of that so you can become present to today, you receive, an energy, an enlivenment that continues to keep you engaged, because you're approaching each day as if it's brand new. So, and it's beyond that once we create that space, we've got to learn to express ourselves. And I don't mean, authenticity, the root word of authenticity is by one's own authority. So when we start to hear, authentic expression, it is by my authority. So that's about me coming into the capturing of my own self as not that I am the boss, but I am the creator of my own self. And I'm taking complete responsibility. I'm not encroaching. I'm not expecting of anyone else, because I realize what I need to do within myself and what I want to create, it's got all of my attention.
Yeah.
And that particular pathway will not be done in, different practices here, there, and wherever. It's a process that is emulated in nature as it exists around us, that once we start to release and let go, of the bark on the tree, of the water down the stream, of whatever it may be, it's all the same. It's always there. And then to express ourselves in the nature of what we are today, the sea is rough, the sea is flat, the water's clear, the water's not. You go to the beach each day, you'll see it changes each day, but it's still the beach. And it goes through and it continues to express itself. And then eventually gets to a place within that expression where it is now ready to receive the fullness of its attention that other people place upon it. But until we can release and until we can express ourselves in a dramatically significant way, we're going to be finding ourselves influenced by what other people are suggesting to us.
Yeah. It's interesting as well, the word even responsibility, Jason, because I think for a lot of people, responsibility has a tendency to have a negative connotation rather than an empowering context.
Oh, absolutely. It's associated, incorrectly with blame.
Yeah, like you're being charged with this responsibility.
Yeah. The police or your parents going, you're responsible for this.
Yes.
This was your responsibility. And, that's, but we all know that, Paul, and we all know that not to be true. We can just feel it within ourselves that word in that particular determination, it doesn't resonate. It's a restriction. So we've got to make a choice that I don't buy into that. So I'm going to ask questions. What is responsibility really? And I would say, and once upon a time, there's a further advancement of that. It's your ability to respond. And that's a great one, like it's an advancement away from being in blame. But then beyond that, it's me responding to my ability. When I come to understand the humility of my own significance, it's the engagement I have to respond to the magnificence of what I am, to be able to stand in my glory and recognize how brilliant I am in certain areas, but also to equally recognize things that don't engage me that I've been having opinions on or having a little flutter on in life, rather than putting all of my eggs in one basket and actually going, this is who I am, this is what I'm here for, and allowing life to come to you, because you put out a beacon at that particular point. It takes a lot of courage to actually stand up and be, this is what I stand for, but I don't stand for that. This is my stream of life. And when I sit in that particular space, I might not find people that I resonate with for a long period of time. And when people change the way they deal with clients, when people change their friendship circles, when people change the location of where they live, these particular things, as we start to recognize ourselves, there's a bit of a purging and a releasing that happens. But it's then we're called to express ourselves in new ways with the new people, the new environment that exists around us. And we start to find more of ourselves. But, this is why, generations ago, people went to a job and they got the gold watch at 20 years, and it was something that people aspired to. People demand more than that from life these days. And, people come in from recent generations where they go from, one place, and if it's not serving, they go to another. And there's either side of the coin with that. But it's just to recognize to what degree am I moving forward? To what degree am I choosing myself? To what degree am I able to deal with the blisters of other people's judgment upon me? Because they're going to happen. But it's also to recognize that, and the real beauty that exists here, that is also what I would suggest to be understood, that when we start to become more of ourselves, yes, we trigger people. Some that are close to us because they feel like they've been deceived because you're now heading this new direction, and why didn't you tell me? And I don't know you anymore.
Yeah.
But the thing is, when that is occurring and when we are being ourselves, we are holding space, not just for ourselves, but dynamically for every single other person around us. It starts to throw vitriolic and anger and frustration and even wants to never see us again. We are stimulating an opening so people can start to be themselves, because they actually, for someone to accuse you and have a real go at you, what they're actually doing is putting you on a pedestal. And what they're crying out for is, I don't know how to get to where you are, so my only thing is to bring you down. I don't want to admit that I don't know how to do that, or that I don't know what I want in my life. So when we become more embodied within our own self, we create a greater space, we have a greater foundation, And we attract more attention, and sometimes it's judgmental attention, because we are seen to be someone who can now deal with that. If we're not recognizing that in ourselves, that part of the path of moving forward will be the tarnishing of our direction, the questioning of our path by others. That's what builds resilience, when we decide to acknowledge, well, thank you. I really appreciate what you're saying, that you trust me enough to actually share that, rather than going in the opposite way. Screw you, who the hell do you think you are? And getting caught up in this mudslinging match, which nothing will ever be achieved from. But for us to continue to keep moving forward in our own example, even when those things are presented to us, is where we find our strength. And, our strength, our capacities, they are unknown. And that is, like you said to me the other night in a quite bit different aspect, but, there's the known and there's the unknown, and in between, there's the doors, I think was the original one, but there is, in the unknown,
the doors of perception.
There is yourself. And it's your choice at any particular point, like feeding the wolves. Do I feed the known? Do I play it safe? Or do I step into the unknown and continue to keep learning and engaging in my life? I don't need to read a book. I don't need to get a mentor of sorts. All I've got to develop is a capacity to continually move forward into the unknown. And I got to recognize in myself, it is the very nature of fear. That is fear encapsulated, and where governments and organizations around the world build upon this, because people don't step into their own engagement and direction, and they look to someone else, and that responsibility they place for these other people then gets directed and shaped into ways that people don't want or like, but their voice is no longer heard, because they've passed over and acquiesced their energy, their decision making, their life to someone else's cause. But it's if we all become strong and actualize within our own self, the strength that we have and the brilliance and beauty that we have. I remember seeing a young girl who, very meek, very quiet, and a family friend, and at about 13, she came out and sung. And her parents hadn't heard her sing, but she just started singing, and it was phenomenal. How many of these talents are hidden away in the fear of our inability to deal with judgment, our inability to expose ourselves? So from releasing and then expressing ourselves, we start to actualize what we are, and it's then learning how we actually maintain a strength in what's coming at us. Is not, they're attacking you, I shouldn't do this. It's not that they're attacking you. What you're actually doing is providing such a deep level of service, not intentionally for them, but for yourself as you pursue your life. But by default, and the beauty and the symbiosis of what happens in life is, as you start to pursue yourself, you start to liberate others. It doesn't mean they liberate them by coming and saying, you're amazing, you've done this for me. But it's recognizing that as you went through things, as you saw people progress, you were probably the same in that same judgment till you got to a point where you go, I don't want to do this anymore. I want a different way of expressing myself in my life and experiencing it. And now you find yourself on a path that might be an alone type path, or let's just say all one instead of alone. And that's what we're doing. We're bringing ourselves into a place where I've got me to rely upon. I've got a lot of friends and family around me, and this is beautiful, but the thing is, when I start to go into that path, you will be confronted by the most significant questions of, and some will come at it from a point of safety. Do you think that's a great idea? Well, why do you keep pursuing this? You could be doing other things. And, reason comes in, safety comes in, security comes in, rather than these false, or they're the synthetic aspects of life, rather than engagements, adventure, exploration. We've got to get away from, when I say these false idols, we've got to get away from best intentioned individuals that are trying to teach us what worked for them, rather than finding a structure and a process that can be applied at each and every moment in our life from an understanding of the example of nature as it exists around us. I'll just go into one thing here, which is something that we share in a bit of a mini course as an explanation, but without failing, whether it's a tree or whether it's an individual, every starting point of every new adventure always begins with chaos. And chaos doesn't necessarily mean to be a bad thing. Chaos is just, it's not currently organized in such a way that supports me. I can see the opportunity, but how the hell do I get there? There's chaos. There's decisions that are not yet made. There's alignments and aspects of that are, that are not supporting that one movement forward. So we have the opportunity, and if we understand that, and we were schooled in this way to realize, wait, okay, you want to do something, that's amazing. Okay, now let's start doing it. Oh, well, there's all this chaos. I don't know if I can do it. No, that's perfect. Chaos is there because it's now asking you, how do you want to organize life? And there's a deep understanding that the highest form of energetic expression is organization. Because when we come to understand and we can direct and we can be resilient in that, we start to organize and align things. So chaos is an imperative starting point. What we must learn within our own self to take advantage of that is how we can get to the next stage, which is ease in the state of chaos, so that we can recognize that the fires are coming to the walls, the people are knocking on doors that I don't want to be, and all the other things that confront me. But I've got to learn to, even though all that's there, and rather than going, oh, you don't understand what I'm going through, this is challenging, you got to understand what they did to me, but you're not hearing me, this is really bad. All of that complaining, as much as it may be cathartic in a sense, eventually we wake up one day and go, you know what? I've been complaining about this for 2 or 3 years and nothing has changed. I then suddenly have this realization from above myself to go, what am I doing? And I then realize, I've got to learn how I want to respond, how I want to relate to these things. And it's not until I find ease in my life, in amongst the chaos, that I can start to make decisions that propel me forward. Prior to that, it's not a decision, it's a reaction, which then means I'm buying back into the same circus, and I'm going to keep doing it. And all I want, if they would just change, if they would just do something different, nothing will occur. And for some of us, when we're deeply impacted and hurt by the actions of another, we don't want to hear that. We want them to realize the pain that they've caused us, but they never did that intentionally, as much as you might like to think so. People don't wake up in the morning and think, how can I make someone else's life worse?
Well, I'm sure there's some people that do.
Well, no, I don't believe so.
Really?
I don't believe so. I don't believe that. In the same way, I don't believe anyone wakes up in the morning and thinks, how can I make my life less than what it is now? How can I bring more suffering? How can I bring less progress? How can I, we don't do that. We might appear that is what is occurring, but that particular person, in the pain that they may be causing you, is still serving them in some particular way. We don't have to react to what it is that they're directing towards us. As an individual, we have the choice of what I'm saying here, that in that chaos that's been inflicted upon me or that I'm finding within my own space, I've got a choice that if I start to act in the chaos, I will create more chaos. But if I can acknowledge the chaos and it exists because it's part of me moving into a place I don't understand yet, because it's life, it's a new part. And then I can go and have the presence to go, all right, I just need to get at ease with this. I'm not going to try and change anything that's there. I've got to see it for exactly what it is, because then I have a true starting point, not an illusionary one, not a fantasy one that's, baked in stories, but one that is, I see it for what it is. And actually, wow, I'm a big part of this. And as I start to recognize that and I become to ease, not judgment of myself, not that I did wrong, not that they did wrong, but at ease and acceptance of the pain that is currently existing, if that's the case, to then be able to go and make a decision from a state of ease is what allows for progress. And it means I don't no longer stay in that same pile of mud that I've been in. You've got to get in ease is getting out of the mud. Like we can't keep jumping into the mud and cleaning ourselves. We've got to step out of the mud, observe the mud. And let's just say that's a state of ease. And from ease, it's only from ease that we can start to develop a state of integration and connection with what we are internally. And once we can do that and we get onto that frequency, and not just occasionally, but we learn to patiently maintain that as a deliberate decision, then what happens as an individual, we can start to ask questions of ourselves. We can start to explore without requirement of anything external to us, where we can start to create our own life, whatever that may be. Whether it's being the best parent or whether it's being, the most significant inventor in the world, whatever that is for each individual, it's not relevant, because when people are truly engaged, if their passion is cleaning, they can create such an impact in life that goes far beyond, the concepts that they feel socially that, well, cleaning is not a good thing to do. It doesn't have status. It's our engagement with it that determines that, not other people's perception of it. And when we start to buy into other people's perception and try and control and change that, we're fighting a war that doesn't even exist, and there is no answer to, because it's irrelevant. It's only a perception. It's not a reality. So
fighting with ghosts.
Absolutely. And once we get and can develop and maintain that connection, because for some of us we have this come to God moment and we go, all right, I'm going to trust myself. we've got to be able to, again, establish the foundation that I now understand that. And once I understand that, I can then move to the next part, which is, gaining awareness from that connected space, because I'm now speaking to myself. I now have authority. I'm now moving into my own authenticity, and I'm going to act by my own authority. And once we have the awareness, we've got to get to a point of then, how do I action this through my own understanding? And once I action that, I can then start to create progress. But you know what? It might not always go right in your eyes because of the perception that you had or your expectation of it.
Yeah.
It goes exactly where it goes, and then it's the ability to be complete with that and not stopping until that is complete, until and here's a definition, is it no longer requires my attention. And what that means is I'm no longer blaming others. I'm no longer saying that someone let me down. I'm no longer saying I don't know what to do, because these things are driving and calling and inviting us to give our attention to it, to find the solution that's already there. But we choose in our life to find completion. If we can recognize that, that relationship wasn't that person, I just chose not to complete in that particular space. I chose not to be honest. I chose to protect myself. But until we can understand that, we're going to continue to see the world around us as a hostile place, rather than just the simplicity. I don't yet understand it. So what that elicits within us is, well, I've got to get a deeper level of trust, a deeper level of awareness, a deeper level of discernment. And, that's on me, not upon them. And for some of us, we can skip to another group, and these people are great. I really love that. But we'll find very quickly, maybe over months or years, that we're back in the same space that we were before. And this is where frustration comes from. This is ultimately where disease is created. This is where death, arises, in a sad space where we don't ever engage with ourselves. So the very being that we are is no longer required because we're not choosing to engage with it. But we engage most within ourselves. We're in a space that we don't understand where we are, because when we don't know where we are, when we don't know where we're going, when we are unsure of that, some of us reach out to God, to help me, to direct me. And it's the relationship that we have to this, higher being, which is our own self, that allows us to find our pathway forward. And it's when we are most lost that we seek those things outside of our own self. This is the exact point of where we start to seek ourselves. And ultimately, as we progress through all those different layers of awareness, we'll eventually come to terms with that, and we'll find grace in our ability to be able to accept and discuss our own brilliance.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And finding grace. And I think that's the thing as well, Jason, is it's been an interesting journey over this series of conversations in relation to actualizing independence. And, I think we're probably about to, and it's refreshing the context that you're sharing around embracing the chaos. That's why I'm getting in the message at the moment, because I think we're about to hit, it's the impact of what's occurring at the moment hasn't arrived yet. And it's going to occur as a bit of a period of chaos and destabilization for recreation and reintegration again. So I think it's, it's refreshing having a context to actually embrace the chaos, and the other societies, etc., or people want to call control structures that they're fundamentally their theory is order from chaos, order out of chaos.
For sure. I mean, and that's the whole thing, that we've got to take the patience and the responsibility within our own self to go, well, yeah, I was pissed off, I was angry, I was frustrated, and this is a soil that I'm now planting these seeds in. Rather than taking a couple of seconds and needing just to say that thing back because you've got to get your point across, to just step back and go, well, I don't need to be the response or the reaction to someone else. I can appreciate what they're saying and allow that to be, but my choice is to go in this direction. I'm not required to respond to anyone who, either any of us are, to anything that's directed towards us. It's a choice. And we've got to be present and aware of that within our own capacity and sovereignty to allow that to happen. That's a most significant thing. I mean, there's many things that we've been told, and there's many things that when we start on a journey of liberating our own self, that we're dealing with the surface level things about, the broken business, the broken relationship, the broken anything in our life that we feel is not right because it doesn't measure up. It's those particular surface things which is ultimately not about fixing them, but leading us to our own attention. It's the more trauma and tragedy we have in our life is a call because of the significance within you. It needs to be exposed. There's an arising there, but for many of us, it's very difficult to assume that of ourselves when we find ourselves in judgment of who we are, what we are, rather than coming to a point of humility to understand what we are. And I just saw there's a question there about sun and sunburn. I mean, we need to ask questions of ourselves like, what is the sun? People who have this assumption, dictated by science and its own biases. And, it's great to have these opinions of other people. And that's all science is. It's an observation and opinion of others. It's not a truth. It never has been a truth. The only truth that exists is a truth that you relate to within yourself. So if we just blindly accept what other people are telling us in any area of life, we're excluding our own self and our own intelligence from that conversation, our own coming to awareness. The sun itself, it cannot harm, it cannot impact us. But what it can do in its own very nature of liberating and purging from you what is toxic, yes, you can get sunburnt, but that is about taking responsibility for what you have ingested in order to provoke that in your own life. But it's, again, we don't need to rely upon science and all these things. It's about relying upon ourselves to go, well, why am I getting sunburnt? Rather than just expecting I'm getting sunburnt because of what I've been told and the sun's harmful for you. The sun's never been harmful. The sun is the most life-giving force in this world. And it's not by mistake that what we call the soul, S-O-U-L, is actually a derivative of sol, S-O-L, which is solar. So it's really important, for us to start to recognize that sun that exists within us, that spark that's there, it's a reminder. But if we can't ask those questions, if we can't explore it ourselves and we need other people to hold our hand or direct us or heal us, we're not allowing ourselves to go through the full transition from what we don't understand into what we now do. And, that's one of the things I look at is, freedom in our own life is created by structure and discipline. But again, it doesn't sound sexy, but the thing is we determine that structure. we choose the discipline. And that's our choice to act rather than acting from chaos, is that we choose to act from ease because we've decided that, wow, when I do that, things seem to go my way. I don't quite understand it yet. But when I continue to choose to not be in a state of fire and state of anger before I act, I then choose to get into a state of ease, and I find that the options that I see that I didn't see previously are now available to me. But when I'm in a state of anger, I'm controlled and a result of what other people are doing or have said. And no matter how much I believe I've got to stand up and fight it, nothing will be achieved because we are just a reaction response to what other people are controlling in our lives that we've allowed, that we've acquiesced to. Rather than when I choose to get into a state of ease, what I'm saying is that I want to be engaged and involved, and I want to be a part of the creation that I'm experiencing in my own life. So, it's really, important to allow ourselves to run our own journey. And, the statements we may make, they relate to us. I think there's something here. People still need to fight the good fight. They don't need to do anything. What people need to do is to understand and express themselves. And this is where we start to expect other people, you've got to be like this. You can't do that. You've got to be this way. These are things that we haven't learned to express and have an impact upon in our own life because we believe we need other people to do that, because we haven't embraced our own magnificence to realize that with me, through me, things change. But when I start looking at, well, I can't do that, and I've got to go and tell this person what they're doing is wrong, this is an individual thing. And I think the same question there or statement, not everything is acceptable. Well, to you, that's right. But it's not we're not here to make decisions for other people. That is what government has become, an overreach and an oversight in our society within. And some people like that because there's not a question of decision that they need to make for themselves. But it's a matter of recognizing that within your own self. But for others, they don't want to be dictated to. They want to find their own liberation. They want to find contribution. They want to have art and beauty as an expression in their life, not just as a painting on a wall, but in the way in which they go about running their business, running their organization, having a relationship. To start dictating, to say to someone, this is what you've got to do. I mean, this is the very tragedy of why war exists, but no, it's the right thing to do. Well, that is determined by you as an individual. this is where, religions fill the gaps in people's lives where they don't know what the right thing is to do. And here's the 10 Commandments. Here's the principles by which you will live by. Oh, okay. That's what I've got to do. All right. So to be a good person, yes, they may be guiding principles and they may be of great benefit and they may be very wise, but they are but a guide. There is no such thing that when we need to go to a church and these types of concepts. And look, I got nothing against churches and what people want to do in those, but what I'm suggesting is there a progression through to a point that we may choose in our own life to find ourselves, to find our own expression within that. And, I know a lot of what I'm saying confronts people, but the very nature of that is I'm here to speak a truth, and it's not there to be accepted by everyone. For some, it will resonate, and for others, they'll think I'm crazy. But, that's the beauty where people then can come to understand themselves more that, well, that's something I don't like. That's something I don't agree with, that then we'll reflect back upon ourselves. Well, hey, what is that within me? Why don't I like that? What is it that I do like? So there's a whole range of things to allow yourself to, to lift up with. A whole range of things to recognize that if we started from the beginning, that everything exists to support me. But right now, I just don't currently understand that. So in my understanding is that I will find a way to do that. We can continue to be educated. We can continue to be, listening and learning to a whole range of things. But if we don't have our own integration, our own foundation, we will be influenced in so many different ways that eventually we become confused. We don't know what the right thing is to do because we're trying to fulfill what other people's expectations and requirements and suggestions are of our own life, rather than within that to go, I see this a bit where someone has an amazing philosophy in their life that's working for them to a degree, but they may have come across some challenges with that at the moment. And when something's not working, it's a great opportunity to redirect it and embrace it. But, when we start to look at, our own life and the opportunities that we do have, and they're abounding. I mean, I've never seen anyone who's decided to move forward with courage in their life that hasn't come and said, it's just amazing. I would never believe that I'd met this person and how all this thing came together. And we talk about it as if it was, some miraculous event. It's not a miraculous event. It's a response to someone embracing and embodying themselves, so having the courage to do that and move forward. And they put a signal out there to everyone else, this is what I'm doing. And people turn up. We're now in the right space. We're now on our own path. We feel our power come to us. And we start to then engage with people in a more significant way. But when we don't do that, we have all the answers as to why we shouldn't. And that won't work because of this. And it is the confirmations of our past and our memories that are starting to dictate why we don't actually create a future, why we don't create anything in our life except for what is safe and secure. And again, it may not be for everyone. But what we're suggesting here, it's about the people that want to lead their life. And if others don't, well great. It's not a problem to recognize within myself that I'm not courageous. I'm not bold enough to do that. And maybe when you sit and ponder that and accept that in our own lives, I mean, I know I've done it many times, is then it makes you realize, well, actually, I am and I can be, because I start to see things in a different way rather than a dogmatic approach that I've always had and maintained.
Yeah. It's been great, Jason. And it's just in closing, for people that have appreciated this as well, how can people reach you? And you can look after people that have been listening to messages from the underground. How can they reach you? How can they find out more information moving forward if they're interested?
Yeah, for sure. It's through the quantum movement. And the best way to do that as an initial relationship is through the Facebook page at this stage. We do have then further private groups that go beyond that, but that's probably the easiest and simplest one to expose here. There is an intention, and possibly even next week, but to go into a 20-minute, half-hour discussion about exactly what it is that we do teach and the basis of that. So yeah, it's the quantum movement. There's a whole range of what I'd say experiences, or not a whole range. There's 3 specific ones. And our focus is to awaken independence. It is to teach and share things so that people never, ever need us again, that they don't need any learning, that they can start to come into their own presence of their own self. So this is not about a subscription to life or a following on of a teaching. We're not looking for followers. We're not looking to create a community. What we're creating is individuals that can start to deliver their life in the way that they choose to and become independent and actualized in their own sovereignty. So that would be the answer to that. I do want to just, there is a question that just popped up there, Paul, and it's a really relevant one at the moment.
Absolutely.
Like it gets under my skin when I see things. And look, you can look back in history. It's interesting about, certain countries around the world and the slaughter that they did of certain races, but there's also the slaughter that is far more significant that's not reported. And it sort of always made me wonder that what happened in Russia compared to what happened in Germany. Far more people died in a place that has hardly ever had any information or any exposure in a far more horrific way. Not to discount what occurred in Germany, but this is, it's a wonder as to why that hasn't been exposed and why there is not the accountability that goes with it. If someone was to say you're a communist, they don't associate it in the same way that you're a Nazi, because of the revolutions that went on in, I suppose, each of those countries. And it's an interesting, well, why is that the case? Where 60 million plus people compared to 6 to 8 million were killed. Like it's a very significant difference. We're talking millions and 10 times.
Is it bad branding?
Well, geez, there's something there, or maybe it's a way it's been presented, and it's our inability to be able to discern the difference. These people are telling me this answer. Am I able to accept that? Is that true, or is there some other agenda here? But there's a real rising in this country at the moment about the accountabilities of government, and I'm going to make a shout out there to the Great Australian Party and GAP. Mm-hmm. They are bringing a full policy to actually what this particular question's about, that we can't stand by and watch governments make decisions that kill us. But I understand that, but when we start to realize in our own life that how much we are killing and suppressing and censoring our own selves, the government is just a reflection of that. We complain about Facebook censoring us, but we are censoring ourselves, but we're not seeing that. We complain about the way in which we are being poisoned through our food, but we don't then take into account the way we're poisoning ourselves with what we choose to eat. There are opportunities in our life, and sometimes it takes a little bit more to navigate through a system that we choose and we want to follow. We've got to make that decision. If we sit there and complain about what others are doing, nothing will change. And yes, there's some travesty and tragedy in the world, no doubt. But the thing is, by fighting against them, we'd assume that they have power. There's the ability to be able to turn your back on something that seems to be so powerful, but fulfilling that with the engagement of your own life and becoming present to what you're going to create to change that. And if you don't have the capacity to change that, but to support those that align with what you're doing, there is the governments are falling all around the world. And there was a spate of it, at the start of this year. And it's gone a bit quiet, and people are not understanding that. There is a significant movement that is occurring in individuals that are demanding a greater truth. And, there is travesty all around the world. But I'm not going to fight a government for power that they do not have. Yeah. They never have had. But as we continue to keep pleading for them to change or to be different, nothing will change. So, that's why I encourage, have a look at GAP, and that's what, what they're doing is about bringing back, and I would suggest people look at, in Australia, our constitution. It is about the supreme power of people living in a common wealth. That is for all to share and benefit from, not to be raised revenue on, not to be affected in some sort of, unlicensed elected leaders. This is about us coming to understand and educate ourselves so that we don't just fix this situation as people are suggesting, but we create an environment within ourselves where these types of narratives and communications would never ever happen again. I would even suggest into a more toxic topic, but pardon the pun, in vaccinations. Here's where we have a question that exists there, is when it comes to vaccinations, us as an individual, what has placed me in a particular position where someone is now suggesting they're going to put something in my arm? Where have I been sleeping until a particular point in time where I've allowed these laws or these suggestions even to be raised, because they should be so scared to raise something like that. We're going to know, there's, like in Adelaide, people refused to bow down to what was going on. Yeah. So, the things closed down and we move forward, but there's been no exposure of that, and people haven't, taken that same example. But with vaccinations, I mean, we have the capacity within our own self that if someone was to inject us with something, that it would have no impact upon us when we know how to integrate ourselves and maintain that. So it doesn't matter what is forced upon us. When we are in complete understanding and integration within our own self, a vaccination put within us is going to have no impact upon us. But is that our responsibility to learn? Is that just a natural part of our own being that we haven't explored, that we now feel fearful of because we haven't taken the responsibility to develop that within our own self? Let alone the fact of the possible toxicity or the liberation that I'm now being taken away, that I can't choose what goes in my body. And I don't believe that will ever happen. These are things of fear that cause people, like what happened in Victoria, that they were fined and a whole range of people paid them, a whole range of people didn't. Then they realised that the fact that they were unlawful, and they rescinded them, but the people had already paid, that's ignorance. They didn't choose to educate themselves. They're not going to get their money back, even though it was found to be unlawful. So this is where, at some particular point in our life that we start to take responsibility for ourselves, and we can find that discernment within us rather than needing to control others. And I would suggest that it's a challenging thing for many, and I hope that it is, because it's when we become triggered that we as individuals start to go, right, there's something not right here for me. So it's up to me to change that. But look, that's a whole other discussion. But I think it's thank you, Robin, for posting the question. And there's a lot of anger and that happens at the moment, but like every conspiracy theory, websites, chat group, I used to see them, and there's some interesting stuff in there, but it was a conversation. There was no action. There was no platform upon which, except for blame, and it becomes more toxic than the people creating the problems that they're complaining about. Because at least those people creating the problems that are vitriolic and terrible and disgusting to many, they're actually creating something. Whilst the others sit there in response and opposition, assuming that they don't have the power to create something themselves. Well, that exists because there's not the beauty of other people standing up in a bold place to go, I'm going to create beauty. I'm going to create environments there. I'm not going to allow myself to be drawn into the problems of other people's creation.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that note, Jason, thank you. I acknowledge you for your contribution for this series. I had a lot of great feedback about it, a lot of downloads, a lot of listens, and that sort of thing as well. Thank you. It's been fascinating. Thank you for your contribution to it. Very, very much appreciate it. And I just wanted to encourage people to do, to get clear and get on track as far as it's where they're at the moment. So anything we can do to reach and contribute it to people is always greatly welcomed and appreciated.
Absolutely. I'll just say one last thing, Paul. I can't help myself, but it's in coming together as a community, we're able to do that fully when we become present and responsible and individualized within our own self, and it encourages others. So I would 100% agree is to not look to how we can change others, but become that change within our own self. And we'll look forward to sharing more on that. And I just want to say thank you so much for having the courage to create a space like this, to continue to keep moving through it, and what you're not just sharing through me, but the whole range of other people that you bring to other people's lives. I think it's phenomenal, and thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. So on that note, we'll sign out on this series. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And please stay tuned to us. And we'll. Do you want to sign out with your saying there, Jace, for the quantum movement?
Okay. Yes. Thanks, Paul. And until we meet again on the inside, enjoy you.
Much love.
Much love.
Thank you for listening to another message from the underground. Want to know more? Head over to Facebook and search for our private Facebook group, Messages from the Underground, or visit www.messagesfromtheunderground.org. To connect with Paul Seils, please visit paulseils.com. Stay human. Protect the planet. Raise the consciousness.